To welcome Kimberly Arcand. She is visualization lead at NASA's Chandra Observatory. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're always happy to have you in studio.
Thank you.
And happy to have you back once again. So you have an exciting new book that comes out tomorrow to everybody, right?
Indeed, yes.
Will you show it off to us?
Yes.
Awesome. Magnitude, the Scale of the Universe. I just had a quick peek at your book. Beautiful. So not only have you written with co-author Megan Watsky, but also you have illustrations in here as well.
Yes, by Catherine Peak, actually. She's incredibly talented.
So this book, we talked about it a few times before when you've been in here, but today we're talking we're going to take an in-depth look at this book. But talk to us just a little bit about what this means, because you're looking at scale. Give us an idea of why you decided to tackle this topic.
Sure. Well, the idea is that, on the nightly news, you might hear about stem cells. You might hear about loss of ice in the Antarctic. You might hear about a new exoplanet being discovered outside of our solar system. And these numbers get tossed around, these huge numbers, 10 to the negative fifth, 10 to the positive 21st, millions, billions, trillions, quadrillions, right? And what does it mean? So the idea behind this book was to kind of take this broad approach to scale, whether through size, distance, area, pressure, density, and try to figure out ways to relate the material to something that we already know. Because if you throw around the idea of millions, billions, trillions, you hear those numbers and you might think you know what they mean, but they're actually hard to comprehend. So one quick example, if I can give it.
Oh, of course.
If you think, how long does it take to count to 100? How long might it take you?
Probably around 100 seconds.
Okay, exactly.
Okay.
So
I'll keep it simple here.
keep it simple. And then if you go up another step to 1,000, how long might it take you?
We'll go with the 100 seconds. We'll keep it
Okay.
keep it at that.
Sure. So then if you're going to go jump up to say, how long would it take you to count to 1,000,000? How many days?
Yeah, that
I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
10 days?
I'm not good that good at math.
Maybe
Sorry,
20
ladies.
days? And then if you're going to have to count to 1,000,000,000, any guesses? Maybe 30 years? And then 1,000,000,000,000? 30,000 years.
Really?
So again, like
Wow.
if you think how big these numbers are, until you can translate it into a sense that makes sense to your time frame, 10 days versus 30,000 years, it's a huge difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So that's fun. I mean, and that's what's nice to be able to put something into concept like that. And kind of fun to be able to play around with it.
Sure.
And fun to be able to have pictures associated with it.
Yes, the pictures are really fun too. Yeah.
And so you are pretty much asked every day to in your job, in your career, to look at how big something is or how small something is with data. Did that also kind of inspire you to take a look at other objects around you, whether they're on Earth or whether they're out in the universe, to take a look at that?
Absolutely. So yeah, in my everyday job, I have to function this way to talk about these really large objects. So things like exploding stars, that might be, say, 20 light years across. And a light year is about 10 trillion kilometers.
Yeah, which for people who are just walking around in the street, light years?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, so 10 trillion kilometers is a light year. So if you multiply that times 20 or 30, and we're looking at some really large distances. So if you're looking at a star that's exploded that's, say, 30 light years across, that might be something that's 1,000,000 billion times bigger than the surface area of the sun and our planets. So that number is huge. Like, how do you make that relatable? And in astronomy, scale is a big problem for a lot of people to be able to wrap their minds around because those numbers are just not accessible.
No.
So that was kind of, again, the idea with the book, to be able to get numbers and contexts that made it just make a little more sense to help out with that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's so fun to be able to think about, because it's so, when you use numbers like that, it just seems so distant that a lot of people might want to just give up or just not think about it, right?
Right.
Like, why bother learning when, what's
Right.
the point? So you and Megan decided to tackle it head on. I read some information you sent me, and then I read an article that Megan wrote. She described scale, and she gave the idea of Starbucks cup sizes to talk about scale, to relate it in terms of all these huge concepts. Is using, a short, a tall, a grande, and a venti, and Trenta, or like going that step farther, that is using just little examples like this a good way to draw people in, to get people excited about science and math and these concepts that we actually use every day without even thinking about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I love the concept of equating it to Starbucks coffee. I actually didn't even know there was a Starbucks short
Oh yeah,
size.
the little one.
Apparently that's not on the menu and you have to request it special.
Special
I did not know
request.
this. I'm
You
not
just
in
need a
with
little
the Starbucks. But yeah, I think having these analogies, you know, like the three bears sort of sizes, that idea of being able to equate to something that we can relate to, it's just an easier way to make something understandable and just that little bit more accessible. Like we can talk about, there is a release that came out not that long ago that talked about gravitational waves. Now, gravitational waves are essentially ripples in the fabric of space-time. And they're really, really small. I mean, incredibly small. If you look at something like an atom is the basic building block of matter, and it's incredibly tiny. A gravitational wave is about 1 billion times smaller. So to put that in some context, you take an atom, which is this, you know, this tiny building block of matter, and you have to scale that up to something the size of an Earth. Then your gravitational wave would be something the size of a marble.
Wow.
And of course, we can't see any of this directly. So, I mean, again, those scales, why do they matter? You know, I mean, there's always this idea of this is information that we can understand. This is information that we're going to hear on the nightly news or on, you know, online. And so there's a way to make that information just a little bit more easily to relate to for us.
And nice to be able to have someone put it into context for us, and then just go with it. You know, why not better yourself and the equations? What were some things that you learned while you were researching this? Maybe something that you hadn't either thought about before, or that you were able to do some research and you're like, oh, maybe I hadn't thought of it that way.
Oh, so much. I mean, so this book actually goes across many different types of fields. It's not just astronomy, it's all the way down to molecular biology and many things in between. So I've been kind of specialized in astronomy for a long time. So to be able to look at these other topics and learn something new about them, there's a whole chapter on like computational power. So if you hear, you know, quadrillions, that means in this case with a supercomputer, you're getting like a quadrillion set of calculations per second. That's a supercomputer.
That's fast.
So these numbers, I mean, for me, again, I'm used to big numbers, but some of these numbers absolutely blew me away. And it was really fun to kind of look at this sort of holistic approach to science, like not just astronomy, but across the board, all different kinds. And I actually learned my own sort of stuff about astronomy too. We were trying to think of interesting ways to make neutron stars, which are the leftover cores from a star that's exploded, and they're really like incredibly dense. A neutron star is perhaps the size of Manhattan, but its material, a teaspoon of it weighs perhaps the size of the amount of about 1 million really fat elephants. So like that was a number that I'd never really contemplated before, right? So just even with this book that, you know, something in my own kind of area, it was fun to be able to think of it in a totally different way. So yeah, we learned a lot.
Oh my goodness.
A lot.
And just being able to put things in perspective. It's something that we all do every day without even really knowing it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Take the Starbucks example, you know, having to know which one's the small one, which one's the large one. Well, we might not know the Italian words, but we definitely have learned it over time to put them into perspective just from the size of the cups. So yeah, it's been a really fun thing to work on.
Another example you used when you were explaining this to me is Taylor Swift.
Yes. Yeah, so again, these numbers that we hear about, I remember when her new song came out over the summer, and it had millions of downloads on Spotify over like a weekend, many millions. And it was this huge, you know, break the internet moment sort of thing. And I'm kind of thinking, well, you know, like what does that relate to? So Megan and I, my colleague, we just decided to put millions and billions and trillions and quadrillions into perspective. So it's just that idea, you know, you can compare the millions of downloads, you can compare it with the billions of tons of ice being lost in the Antarctic, you can compare it with the trillions of US dollar debt that you hear about, and just kind of think of different ways to relate these materials to each other. You know, I mean, the scale is amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
And we're comparing things every day, but just looking at them from different points of perspective might help us figure out what it all actually means.
Exactly.
So if you don't mind, I'm just going to hold this up here before we move on, because you're continuing your work. So Magnitude, The Scale of the Universe is available, goes on sale tomorrow. Pre-orders already happened, but you can find it. Where do you like to get your books?
Well, there's a Barnes & Noble right down the road for me, so that's kind of my easy place. But there's some great bookstores in this state, from Barrington Books and Barrington Books Retold, and also the Brown Bookstore is carrying it, Savoy Books down in Westerly, I believe. There's just a lot of great bookstores, and of course Amazon is carrying it in a bunch of online indie stores too.
Awesome.
So yeah,
I just wanted to give people a little peek inside because it's not all. Sometimes when people think science books, they think of textbooks, but it's beautiful inside and out. So that's a little peek at your book. Also want to talk about this amazing thing that you're doing. I was overwhelmed by it. So coming up November 15th, you're holding a talk, How to Hold a Dead Star in Your Hand, on Thursday, November 16th, 7:30 in Cambridge. So you came on our show, I think back in April or May, and brought your 3D model of a dead star, which talk about scale, how to just comprehend something. But we held it in our hand. You've been working with this data for a long time, and now you're kind of taking that data to just this next level. Talk to me about this.
Yes, I'm very, very excited about this project. So the idea is to take information of the universe that we've been able to visualize in some three-dimensional sense. And as you mentioned, we started out with, well, basically just a 3D model on a computer. And then we brought it into a 3D print environment so that we could hold this dead star. A star many times the size of our sun, about 15 times or so, exploded, and it creates this amazing leftover remnant. So we can visualize that into 3D and hold it in our hand, which is great. But you're holding plastic, and it's little, it's maybe 5 inches across, when the thing in actual life is, 25 light years across. So the idea was to next try to make something that felt a little more immersive. So we worked with our friends at Brown University, who have been absolutely amazing, Tom Seguros and Elaine Jiang. They have been just so great to let me play in their yurt, which is a virtual reality environment where you're kind of in a room and there's a strip of cameras that go around and you're essentially inside the data. So the first time they ever rigged this data set up for me into this immersive yurt, and I got to walk inside a dead star, and honestly I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like jumping for joy and being a little silly, but I've worked on this data for like almost, 18 years in some way or another. So to be able to walk inside it finally after that and be able to be inside a star that exploded, and you can see it from the inside, from the outside, you can see it above, you can see it below. It's been amazing. And we just translated it, again, working with our friends at Brown, to an Oculus Rift version so that there'll be a personal virtual reality coming. And we have a layer of augmented reality on top so that you can understand where the sulfur, the silicon, the iron in this exploded star come from, which all relates back to us because the iron in our blood, that type of material comes from dead stars.
It's so incredible, one, that you've been able to do this after you said, just that personal element of this, been able to incorporate that. This is an experience and an opportunity that it's so incredible. You would never be able to have it. To think you could touch something, you could touch a star, right? A representation of a star, but now to be able to experience what it's like inside
it.
What are the opportunities for this? You're going to be talking, so people are going to be able to see it, but what comes next for that?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure because it's so brand new. Virtual reality to me is definitely like this cutting edge technology that's starting to, catch fire a bit, and augmented reality as well. So I think the idea for us is to see both experts and non-experts, what they kind of make of this. I would love to see this in museums. I would love to see kids being able to walk inside a dead star. Who knows how many future astronomers you might hook that way, right? But also on the expert side, like being able to understand your data in this completely different way, when you can visualize it in this very multi-dimensional, graspable way. Who knows what kind of exciting science that we can better understand because of that format.
Well, going off of that, think about the type of learning that you can do. We all learn in different ways, but imagine you have been looking at this data, you said, for 18 years.
Right.
So look at the numbers that you've been able to think of that, but now being able to look at your data just in a different way, just sparking a different kind of learning.
Absolutely. And actually, when we come back to the three-dimensional prints, for us, we've had this amazing response from the blind and visually impaired community.
Oh my gosh,
because this is, right, for one thing, this is all invisible data to begin with, right? So I'm working primarily with X-ray information, which we cannot see with our puny little human eyes, right? So it has to be visualized in some sense. So to be able to have a three-dimensional print that you can hold, that somebody who has not been able to see data before can then experience it through this visual mapping technique, it's absolutely incredible. We've learned so much from working with different blind and visually impaired audiences to improve our models, to make the tactile understanding of them better, make them stronger. It's an incredible thing. So to now have this new format in virtual reality instead, again, like different kinds of learners can look at this information and understand it in a whole new way. I'm very excited for that.
I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for the opportunities that this provides. Yeah. And this is just the beginning for virtual reality. I mean, there's so many opportunities with that for businesses, for travel, for education.
Yep.
And I think we're only beginning to see the start for educational purposes.
I agree.
And this is just one more step. So I'm excited for this. So if you are interested, the talk is November 16th. So still 10 days away.
Yeah.
So do you think you'll be giving lectures with this and talks on this a little bit close? I mean, Cambridge isn't far, but a little bit closer to home. Will this be kind of maybe more than a one-time thing?
I would hope so. I mean, this project has been a bit of a passion project for me, so I definitely do not picture dumping it anytime soon. I would love to be able to talk about it more. I mean, I really do honestly get excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I'll be talking about it, but I'd love to have some version around here, especially because we did so much of the work right here at Brown University. And I would love to be kind of inclusive of that. So yes, I'm sure we will do more events for sure, locally.
Locally, perfect. So not far, but again, maybe a little bit closer to home.
Yes, a little closer to home.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so amazing to talk to you a little bit, learn a little bit more about scale, and learn a little bit more about exploded stars.
My favorite.
Of course. Well, and just again to get the opportunity to hear a little bit more about that as you continue to dive in, and hopefully I'll be able to have an opportunity to do that too. Maybe you'll share that with us again. So thank you so much. You can catch her book, Magnitude, The Scale of the Universe. Goes on sale tomorrow, November 7th. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Please, everyone, hang tight as we get set up for our next guest.